Today, the jury selection began just blocks away from Ground Zero in the first civilian trial of a Guantanamo Bay detainee. It's the case of Ahmed Ghailani. He faces 286 federal counts related to the August 7th, 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya, where 224 people were killed, including 12 Americans. Now, Ghailani is accused of helping deliver bomb-making components, including TNT and oxygen tanks, in a truck detonated outside the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania. He fled Africa with a senior al-Qaeda explosives trainer, and according to court papers, then remained an active participant in al-Qaeda as a bomb maker, a document forger, and as an aide to Osama bin Laden himself. He was then captured in Pakistan in July of 2004, held and questioned by the CIA for more than 2 years, and was transferred in 2006 to Guantanamo Bay. Now, Ghailani has pleaded not guilty and also claimed that he was subjected to enhanced interrogation for 14 hours over a period of 5 days, which one judge earlier said served compelling interests of national security. Now, if you remember, there has been a lot of debate as to whether or not others like Ghailani should be tried in military commissions or in civilian courts. And many are seeing this as that first test case. But I guess the real question that we have to ask is why a test is needed to begin with. Well, joining me from Chicago is attorney Kelly Saindon, partner at Alonya, Shapiro, and Franklin. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. Now, let me get this straight. I want your opinion. Do you believe that he should be tried, Ghailani, in a civilian court or in a military commission?
I think he should be tried in a military commission. This is a terrorist. He should be treated as such, and he should be treated like we're in a time of war. He should not be afforded rights of our citizens.
But we have tried other terrorists in federal courts. In fact, I think that 150 suspects of terrorism have been convicted in federal courts since September 11th, and only 3 people have ever been convicted with military commissions. So how is this case any different than those 150 others?
Well, this case is different because it's a sensitive issue. It's someone that's specifically tied to Osama bin Laden. He is trying to use our rights as citizens to protect him from our judicial system. So he's saying his Fifth Amendment rights are violated, his Sixth Amendment rights are violated, that these enhanced interrogation tactics should not allow evidence and admissions that he made to come in. So he engaged in terrorist activities in a time of war. He was hostile to the United States. He, I believe, was involved in what ended up deaths of American citizens, and now he's trying to say that he should be afforded protections of our citizens, and this is different because he is trying to exploit our systems to his benefit.
But just remind me, in 1998, when this bombing took place, were we at war?
In 1998? I guess it depends on who you're asking, because there were announcements that the war was over, and announcements that there's always been an ongoing war. So it depends on whether you look at a terrorist activity, especially one that's United States embassies on foreign soil being bombed, as a war or not. That's how you define it.
I think that's, one of the problems here, too, is people are saying that with this global war on terror that we're fighting, that has become so expansive, you don't know when it began, when it might end, you don't know what border it even touches. It somehow seems to span all borders. Then it seems like anything goes. I mean, what happened to the fact that this is America? This is a country with a strong justice system, a country with a rule of law that we very much respect and are proud of. Why do we just throw that out the window now?
Well, I think the reality of the situation is people are incensed that individuals that allegedly are terrorists, that admit to being associated with terrorist activities and terrorist groups, are being afforded protections. So the victims weren't protected, but now they're getting special protections from our citizens, taxpayers, individuals here. They're exploiting our system. They're taxing our system. They need additional security. All of the resources to try them for criminal matters in a civilian setting are draining on our economy. And if it was the military, they have their own tribunal, and they actually understand the tactics that were used with the interrogation, the warfare, and a lot of this stuff is so confidential that in a civilian trial, it never sees the light of day.
But, you know, there's been a lot of problems with these military commissions. I mean, to begin with, they're fairly new, right? There isn't exactly, this is kind of uncharted territory, and a lot of attorneys out there will be the first to admit that this isn't necessarily the best system, that the federal courts have a better track record, that they've given harsher sentences. And, you know, not to mention, it takes a lot of money also to fly everyone out there to Guantanamo Bay just for these commissions. It's not like that's much cheaper for the taxpayer. Regardless, money is being spent here.
You're right. I mean, there's pros and cons with everything, but the reality comes down to, do these federal trials work? Are we now going to import in the 174 Gitmo detainees and try them all on U.S. soil? So we're going to bring them into our country.
I don't quite see what the problem is, considering we've already tried 150 suspected terrorists on U.S. soil. Why is it now that it's become such an issue?
Well, if we import 174 of these individuals and put them in a holding cell in New York, you're not concerned that there's going to be some sort of blowback or some terrorist activity over that to stop them from confessing secrets, to abort our justice system, to create more turmoil, that we're going to have additional military in there to protect them?
Well, I don't really see how having them on U.S. soil or on Cuban soil in a little jail cell makes any difference. Obviously, the fact that we're detaining people illegally, that our country has been torturing people, that's not good press all over the world.
I agree that it's not good press, but I don't think that there's any other way to go about it. Do you really think if they just walked in and said, "Sir, tell us what you did," he's going to volunteer information?
Well, in fact, if you look at the case of the underwear bomber in December, they read him his Miranda rights, and he did, in fact, comply and, and answer the questions. So there is proof that you don't need to torture people. You don't necessarily need to detain them. You can work within the rule of law and the system that this country has built, which is what makes it great. I have to say it again.
I don't necessarily disagree with you in that particular case, but he wasn't successful. He didn't bomb the plane. This was somebody who got caught in the process. He was unsuccessful, and I think he wanted to get his story out there. Had he been successful, he wouldn't be alive to be able to avail himself to our protections. You have to remember that. That is somebody who is trying to undermine the way of our society. So to say our system's working to his benefit is a little bit of a problem, I think.
Well, I want to ask you this question. This is something that I found very interesting about this case, is that they're actually planning on using Osama bin Laden, who's also been indicted here, to establish that the defendant intended to kill Americans. And so they're taking bin Laden's words, things that he said in interviews where he said that U.S. civilians are his targets. And then they're saying that because Ghailani was a follower of bin Laden, then of course American citizens had to be one of his targets too. I mean, by that logic, it's like you can go to a church and you find a preacher that perhaps, was spewing some kind of hateful rhetoric. Then he goes out and kills someone. And then everyone in his congregation is also implied.
I understand what you're saying, but I think to liken a preacher to Osama bin Laden are a little bit different because it's fundamentally a different ideology, and Osama bin Laden has been very public about wanting to destroy America.
Yeah, but they're using Osama bin Laden to talk about the defendant in this case, which I'm not quite sure if that's really fair or right or legal to make that kind of connection.
Character always comes into play, and you can always associate, if someone is a gangbanger, then you can show that he's affiliated with the gang, and therefore it's more likely than not that his bad acts had something to do with that. Well, I agree that there's certain issues, but I don't think they're going to get all of the Osama bin Laden stuff in. In a military tribunal, hearsay is admissible. In civil cases, there's specific rules. And so to say that he subscribes to this theory, they may ask him, but he's been on the record before. Now, Ghailani saying, well, I didn't know I was going to kill Americans. How does that make it okay? He knew he was involved in a scheme to bomb a U.S. embassy, and so his defense is, I didn't know Americans would die?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we go by character, our track record isn't exactly the best either, considering that we tortured people, but it definitely is an interesting debate. Civilian or military commissions, regardless, this trial will go ahead, and like I said, they're calling it the test case. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.